Hey guys, Mr. Brighting here to talk to you guys about graphing and some of the basics of graphing. Um, there's a few parts that I'm going to be looking at anytime I grade one of your graphs. There's a reason why I look at each of these pieces, and I'll explain each of them as I go. So, when you create a graph, you have both your x-axis, which is the horizontal line going left and right, the y-axis going up and down. Um, Now on each axis you're going to have 10 increments. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Same thing on the y. Okay, you do not count the 0 increment here. Okay. The next thing you're going to have is you're going to have your x-axis labeled. You're going to have your x-axis labeled with your independent variable. This is what you are controlling. Now in the case of a time distance graph, um, we're going to put the time at the bottom. Now with time we want to have the unit. We want to have the unit because it tells the person the exact duration. Because if you were to not have this here, someone might be thinking hours, days, years. There's a lot of ways to measure time. On the y-axis we put our dependent variable. Now the reason why we have our independent down here and our dependent up here is because you always measure your dependent variable. You're trying to figure out what's happening to the dependent variable as the independent changes. You want to see if it's going up or down on this graph here. Okay. Now distance can be measured in many different ways, just like time, and so we do need to have the units with distance. Now we always put the unit inside of the parentheses. Next is the title. The title just pretty much is telling the reader or person that's analyzing the data what is going to be presented in the graph. Now you can obviously tell that it's a time distance graph just by looking at the axes, but we want to also include those variables inside of our title. Sometimes graphs get a little bit more complex to where it's not just the independent dependent variable, but the most simple way to do a title is just include those two variables. Okay. Um, now that we have our x-axis set up, our y-axis set up, both of them labeled with their units and a title, the next thing you need to do is you're going to label each of your increments. Okay. In most cases, we will label 0 at the 0, 0 coordinate. Now, how do you figure out what numbers do you put here? Okay, what a lot of students will do is they'll take these numbers up here and they'll just actually plug them in here, which I have no idea why, but it does happen. Now, what you want to do is you take the highest value for each variable. So for time is going to be very easy. The highest value is 10. Okay, so now you take 10 and you divide it by the number of increments that you have. If you have 10 increments and you divide it by 10, that means that you're going to go up by ones. And what I mean by that is that the first increment, we're going to start with 1. The next one is going to be 2. And we'll go all the way up until we get to 10. Alright, now it just happens that, it goes up 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and we would do the same thing here. Now with distance, a lot of students again are going to would put 2, 6, 12, 20, 30, 42, and so on all the way up to 90. What you actually want to do is you find the highest value, you find 90. So you take 90, okay, so we have 90, and we divide that by 10. Okay, and what we get, 90 divided by 10, is 9. Alright, so what this tells us, what this 9 tells us, is that we're going to go up in increments of 9. All right, now 9 might sound like an odd value. So what you can do is you can round up to the nearest non-odd value. So the nearest non-odd value would probably be 10, okay? And that gets us up to from 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, okay? And so that takes us all the way up to 100. Now you never ever will round this number down. So 9 will never be rounded down to 8. If you were to round it down to 8, then the highest value here would be 80, and you would be graphing off of your graph. Okay, 90 would not fit onto your graph, and you don't want to start making lines that go off of your graph. In addition to that, you don't want to have it to where you're rounding up a whole lot. So meaning, let's say if this value was not 90 and it was 60. Okay, so 60 divided by 10 is going to be 6. Now, if you rounded 6 all the way up to 10, your highest value would just come up to here on the graph. Okay, so you would have 40% of your graph wasted. A good rule of thumb when you're making the graph is that you are using at least 75% of the space. Okay, so 75% of that space should be used up. Let's see if I can get a nice shape in here. Alright, so this space here, at least 75% of that should be used. So if your line looks like something like this, you're only using about 40% of the graph. Your line should look more like it's coming near the top and using most of the graph. If anything is missing, or if you're using less than 75% of your graph, that's usually a point deducted from your grade. So meaning if you only have distance and time without their units, but everything else is correct, that can drop you from an advanced to a proficient grade. If you are missing your units and a title, or anything else, if you're missing 2 things, then that could drop you down to a partially proficient. If you're missing 3 things, or if you are not using 75% of your graph, or if your line is coming all the way up to the top here and off of the grid, then that could drop you down to unsat. Okay, so now once you have your graph set up, you have all of your axes labeled and you have your increments labeled with their values, then you can start graphing data. Okay, now each point, you have a 0, 0 points. Okay, you always want to put a dot there. You have a time 1, distance 2. Okay, so that'd probably end up being about right there. Now, you always want to connect your dots so long as your x-axis has a value that can go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, or up in sequential order. Okay? Alright, so I'm just going to quickly go over the increments again, because I know that that can be pretty confusing, and that's probably one of the things that is messed up nearly the most. So again, we take that maximum value of our dependent variable, or whatever variable we're working on. Again, if it's a weird number, you round up. Okay, so if you end up having like a number like 29 meters divided by 10, would end up being 2.9. You don't want to go up by 2.9s to get all the way up to 29. You'd round up to 30, divide that by 10, and you get 3. So you'd go up by 0, 3, 6, 9. Now, quick exercise here is, given these increments, or given these numbers here, what increments would you actually go up by? Okay, so you have 50. You divide 50 by 10, so you know your increments would be 5. 55, you divide that by 10, and you get 5.5. Again, you don't want to go up by an odd number like that, and so you'd probably round up and you'd go up by 6s. 100, really easy, you go up by 10s. 100 divided by 10 would be 10. 9, you could divide 9 by 10 and you get 0.9. Now again, that's a weird number, so you'd probably want to round up to 1, so you go up in increments of 1. 28, again, you divide 28 by 10 and you get 2.8. A weird number, you round up and you go up by 3s. Alright, so let me just briefly go over each piece one more time with you guys. Label your axes. Independent goes on the X, the left-right axis. Put the unit. Dependent variable goes on the y-axis. Put the unit. It goes on the y-axis because it is the thing that we are measuring. We want to know if it's going up or down when we change the independent variable. Title. Title needs to have both the x and y axis, or both the independent and dependent variable in it. You need to use at least 75% of your graph. You can ensure that you use 75% of your graph by going up in appropriate increments. You find the appropriate increment by using the highest value for that variable and dividing it by 10. Alright, that is about it for basic graphing. Other than that, see you guys next time.